This week, we're speaking to the guy who trains financial planners to do financial planning. So, when we're talking about making better wealth decisions, one of the best financial decisions you can make is to hire someone who knows what they're doing to actually help you make better wealth decisions. What goes into being a financial planner in Canada today, and what do you need to look for when you're trying to hire one? This is Make Better Wealth Decisions, a podcast about financial blind spots, decision making, and how the reality of higher rates, global tensions, and tariff instability impact your investments. I'm your host, John DeGuy, a portfolio manager with Design Securities in Toronto. We're speaking with Daniel Fernandez. He is the Director of Post-Secondary Engagement at FP Canada. He teaches financial planning at the university level and leads FP Canada's national work with post-secondary students. He helps shape the next generation of financial planners in Canada. That role sits at the intersection of education and the future of financial planning in Canada. He has a mandate to help guide Canadian students into more of the profession and to support FP Canada's mission of financial wellness and for all of Canadians. As a result, he helps design educational pathways into the CFP and QAFP designations. Daniel, how are you today?
Oh, I'm well. Thanks so much for having me on, John.
It's wonderful because I really believe that a lot of what can be done to help people make better wealth decisions revolves around the people who are helping make those decisions and making sure that they are better equipped to do that. And you're the guy on the front lines. You're the guy who's actually teaching the people who will be the ones who will be giving the advice and helping people make better decisions down the road. So I'm super excited to have you on today. Let's begin by asking about your role at FP Canada and what exactly does FP Canada do to support better decision-making among financial planners?
That's a great question, John. And it's twofold. So first, my role, it really sits at the intersection of education and financial planning. So a bit about me, I've been in the industry for about 15 years as a practicing CFP professional. I've also been teaching. So I've been teaching at the college and university level financial planning courses. So my role here at the FP Canada or Institute is really to strengthen the pipeline from students who are then entering the profession that we know and love. And the goal is really to serve Canadians better, right? Financial wellness for Canadians. So I work really closely with universities and colleges across the country, also industry partners, just to share how future planners are trained before they sit, across from a real client. So that involves a few things, designing clear education pathways into the CFP designation and QAFP designation, and ensuring programs emphasize not just technical knowledge, but judgment, professionalism, client-centered decision-making. So my work really involves around strengthening that bridge between classroom and real world practice. So graduates are career ready. And your question about decision-making among planners, right? So at its core, I work for the FP Canada Institute, which is sort of the education arm. So it exists really to elevate the practice of financial planning in Canada. So we have, the two designations, the CFP designation and the QAFP designation. Those really set the benchmark for excellence, I would say, in financial planning. They really ensure planners are trained to think holistically, not transactionally. So that means planners are taught to integrate financial management, tax, retirement, and estate planning, right? It's quite holistic, and we don't treat them as silos. So from a consumer perspective, this matters. And I know you're passionate about this because life doesn't show up in these neat categories, right? A decision about investments affects taxes. A career change, which we're seeing, with the advancements of AI, affects retirement, family illness, having kids, divorce,
Sure.
right? So good financial planning isn't about picking products. It's really about making good decisions when life gets complicated.
So talking about the complications of life, where the rubber hits the road, what would you say are the biggest gaps in terms of the people that are coming out into the world and offering advice and the things that you see right now in terms of new advisors and the people that are perhaps already in the business and the advice that they give?
That's a great question, John. And I'll just share a quick story about myself at my own expense. So when I was if I say so myself, I finished top of the class. I was an excellent student. And when I had graduated from a financial planning program, when I had my first client interaction, I was ready to solve all of Canada's problems before lunch. But then as the interaction unfolded, I realized I didn't know what I didn't know. So there is a big gap between, cases in a textbook and real clients, right? So new advisors, they often come technically capable, which is fantastic, but they're less prepared for ambiguity, emotion, human behavior, right? Like we all want as financial advisors, financial professionals, we would love for clients to make optimal decisions, right? But clients don't show up asking for these optimal solutions. They show up anxious, overwhelmed, sometimes overconfident, or conflicted. So another gap really is about uncertainties. Real planning, it involves incomplete information, sometimes making trade-offs, right? When you have the second or third child, imperfect choices, divorce, right? Things get messy. And the math is often the easy part, but the people part, that's the hard part. How do we get clients to know, like, and trust us? How do we build that rapport? And how do we advocate for clients' best interests? So there's that professionalism gap, framing tough conversations. And here at the FP Canada Institute, right, we're increasingly focused not just on what planners know, right? Because there's the body of knowledge, there's the core competencies, of course, but how do we balance empathy with accountability, and how do we think and behave in real client terms and real client interaction? So we don't just train planners to be right, we train them to be responsible.
A lot of that is bedside manner. If you think about other professions, a lot of what we're learning in the 21st century is that it's not about your proficiency in terms of your technical knowledge. A lot of it, the best technical knowledge in the world, is of very little value if you can't motivate people to do what needs to be done. If you're a doctor, maybe it means just changing your lifestyle and reducing your, not smoking, and changing your diet and your exercise pattern. But it's the same sort of thing with financial planning. We have to, encourage people to maybe have a better saving regime, or tell them, yeah, actually, you do need that insurance policy because you've got dependents and you can't just slough it off. So there are a lot of things that people don't necessarily think of that you need to be able to empathically engage to get people to act in a way that they might not be ordinarily inclined to act. Let's talk about the designations themselves, the CFP and the QAFP. What are they, and why are they important to Canadians?
Perfect. So the CFP designation, that stands for Certified Financial Planner. It's the gold standard in financial planning. The QAFP is a Qualified Associate Financial Planner. So these designations, right, in certain provinces, on Ontario, for example, calling yourself a financial planner, it is title regulated, right? So having one of these designations, you can call yourself a financial planner. And the designations, they really matter because financial decisions, they are becoming more complex, and they do have consequences, right? So as part of my role here at FP Canada, or the FP Canada Institute, I work closely with post-secondary institutions and the profession to really ensure the CFP pathway reflects the realities, and the QAFP pathway as well reflects the realities that planners face today, right? It's at the time of this recording, it's Christmas 2025. A lot of folks, will be buying Christmas presents with their credit cards, right? And paying it off in the new year. There's rising debt levels. You talk a lot about market impacts, macroeconomic factors, longer retirements, right? That's, you retired at 65, but now, you're living longer as well. Behavioral biases, fast moving technology, right? So in my view, these designations, they really signal three things to consumer. One is that the professional, the CFP professional or QFP professional, they do have broad integrated education. There is ethical accountability, and there's a commitment to professional judgment, right? Not necessarily just, meeting client needs with products, for example, right? Because anyone can kind of sell a product, but not everyone is trained to guide a life, right? In that sense. So for planners, the designations, they create a shared professional language and a framework, I would say, for decision making. So for consumers, they create trust, right? And I'll just share a bit about my story, right? When I first started, I was 21 years old, and it was 2008, right? We all know what happened in 2008. So I'm 21 years old, and I'm talking to folks that are entering retirement, 65-year-olds. Their portfolios are down 30, 40, sometimes 50%. And we're I'm trying to provide the advice to the best of my ability. At the time, I didn't have any designation, so I didn't know really how it integrated with other aspects of their life, like retirement decumulation, estate planning, and all of that. So it really kind of getting the designation helped me to holistically understand my clients and holistically kind of understand all of the impacts that not just their investments have, but risk, insurance, financial management, right? Just the basic things, the income and expenses, right? Because we can't outrun, overspending and sort of consumerism as well. So understanding sort of holistically is how clients behave and how certain elements of financial planning integrate together as part of being sort of a CFP professional and a QAFP professional, where you know that this person that I'm dealing with has the highest standard when it comes to all of these underlying aspects of financial planning, not just one.
Let's talk about how you support them. When you think of the role that the Institute plays and that FP Canada plays in helping the newly minted people who are coming out with these designations, coming out of school and sitting across the kitchen table from mom and pop for the first time and offering their advice and trying to help guide them to make better wealth decisions. What exactly does FP Canada do to help them, to give them tools and maybe to give them support as it's needed?
That's a great question. And I really love that question. And I think we can probably have a whole podcast on this question as well. I know you're very involved with that next generation as well. Speaking in the classroom, writing books about the next generation. So this next generation, like I have kids that are Gen Alpha, right? And now we're talking about Gen Z that's graduating colleges and universities. So they're entering the profession differently, right? And they for one, they serve a more diverse population. They serve a population that has specific biases about perhaps, never owning a home in this market, or let's say if you're in the main metropolises in Canada, right? But what we're doing is we're really evolving things through experiential learning, right? How students can move from classroom knowledge to real world competence. And the future of the profession depends on who gets invited in and how well we prepare them once they arrive. So for example, when I talk to colleges and universities and the underlying FP Canada recognized programs that they have, right? Modernizing education expectations. What does that look like? That looks like sometimes simulated client experiences, right? So I just finished teaching a class in my fourth year retirement and estate planning class. And what I did was I acted as a client. So I pretended to be the client and my students prepared a financial plan. And my scenario was, I'm high in debt. I have a great job, but I'm high debt, payday loans, just kind of interesting elements that you wouldn't necessarily come across. And how can students empathize with a client in this situation, perhaps low net worth, but high income, right? We call them sort of the Henrys, like high earners, not rich yet. Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating, right? With the Gen Z era, human interaction is sort of at a low, right? Where you're kind of swiping on an app to date somebody, and you're kind of more so texting or you're on the apps these days. And I'm kind of dating myself here, but that human interaction and how you come across the client, how you build the rapport, how you provide them with advice that sometimes might be getting into the weeds, being a little sometimes confrontational, getting to areas that are uncomfortable. I think that's the harder part. So experiential learning is really the key here. And that is more AI resistant. And that's why sort of the future of the profession, our profession, really is that human approach, right? We were at the FP Canada conference recently, and Dr. Staples, she had a great quote that if you like money and you like helping people, like this is a profession for you, right? So it's really financial wellness for all Canadians. And what that looks like is being there for your clients through thick and thin, empathizing with them, walking in their shoes, and being a fiduciary, basically acting in their best interest.
It's funny because when I was thinking about the example you were using when you were speaking to your class, when you sort of did the case study and you were the high earner, but also in debt, I actually had a meeting this past week with a prospective client couple where they're both dentists, and he literally is now bumping up against what will this year be a 7-digit income. That you heard that correctly. But despite that, they are heavily in debt. And went to school in the U.S. He's got U.S. student loans. He's got other expenses, a big mortgage, and yada yada. Kids in private school, and despite having a 7-digit income, they're having a hard time paying off their credit card every month. And so the message I would reiterate, just listening to you speak, is that this is not just hypothetical. There are actually people out there that have these sorts of problems. And yes, these are also legitimate problems. And people listening will say, that's a problem I would love to have, but it's a real problem nonetheless. I'd like to see if we can move on to something that we've danced around a little bit that I love talking about that we haven't really touched on yet, and that's behavioral economics. What exactly is being done in the classroom? Because this is one of my laments. When I learned financial planning and took the Canadian Securities course and did all the coursework, and when I was in graduate school in university, there was absolutely nothing about behavioral economics that was being taught. It was seen as being, Richard Thaler would say that the presumption of people being econs, people being, people who are quite capable of maximizing their own utility based on their self-awareness of what they liked and disliked and making rational decisions. We know now that that's absolutely not true. So can you tell us about what's in the curriculum and what's being done to help the next generation of financial planners understand human biases and finding ways to overcome them?
That's a great question. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge, right? If only clients listened exactly to what we said, right? The best financial plan in the world is completely useless if no one sticks to it, right? Financial planning, it is as much about the psychology as it is about the numbers, right? So people will procrastinate, they'll avoid discomfort, they'll anchor to past decisions. I watched a recent podcast with Dr. Preet Banerjee talking about anchoring, right? And anchoring back to past decisions, becoming overconfident when you're in these little silos, like let's say in the lunchroom, and talking about pensions at work and reacting emotionally to money, especially under stress. So the FP Canada Institute, we really increasingly emphasize behavioral awareness because good advice fails if it can't be followed. So there are, specific examples that we're using to kind of teach students about the behavioral elements of planning and kind of the heuristics and biases that we don't often think of, right? Because insanity is sort of doing the same thing every day and expecting a different result. And it's often the case. When I had my class and we did that simulated client experience, right? A lot of the students, it was similar to your dental or dentist client where they were a high earner, but they also had this high lifestyle, right? Although they were going to although this client experience case scenario, the client was visiting payday lenders, they were also sending their kids to private schools. And the easy solution is that the students were posing is, hey, just take your kids out of the private school and put them in public school. That'll save you, 30 grand, 60 grand a year. But there's a lot of emotional baggage behind that, especially when it comes to our children and the things that we want for our children and the lives that we want them to have. So really the ability to incorporate behavioral science into financial planning, that I see that as the future of financial planning. And that is sort of, if any young person is listening, getting that right and understanding human behavior when it comes to financial planning. I was visiting families over the holidays recently, and one of my cousins was saying, I have a financial advisor, but I keep things from them. They're going to hate the things that I do, right? You want to have a financial plan that's going to account for things. There's going to have some buffer room there. You're going to know your client well enough to know that they're going to maybe splurge on certain things. And let's factor that into the budget. Let's factor in an annual vacation and things like that so that our clients don't fall back on their, we're sometimes their worst enemy.
Yeah. Let's talk about, I only have a few minutes left, so I have a couple of questions I wanted to really make sure I didn't miss. And that is, what advice would you say is the most important that you're giving right now that you can impart upon the new planners opening their practice and giving advice to retail clients? What would you say is the number one thing they need to be aware of?
I think it's about getting on the same level as the client, not speaking over them with all the technical jargon, all the acronyms that we know and love, and the GRIP, TFSA, FHSA, RSP, RESP. We want to be present with the clients, and that really means building a strong emotional connection with the client, understanding their needs, and putting yourselves in their shoes, right? So it's focusing less on having the perfect answer, and it's more about active listening, asking the right questions, right? Like your first discovery call is all about the client and really asking them the questions and putting them kind of in the hot seat, being curious, listening. And, I'm guilty of this, but pausing on the advice too early, right? We want to understand and know your client first before getting into the solution.
To use the medical metaphor, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice.
Right.
That's what they say, right? So there you go. Okay, so let's see if we can end this off with the question that I always ask. I just asked you about what advice you're giving to the people that are entering the industry as financial planners. What advice would you give to ordinary people who are clients of financial planners, clients of financial advisors, to help them make better wealth decisions? What would you tell them to do?
I would tell them to first and foremost, I would say meet with a professional, like a CFP professional or a QAFP professional, somebody that treats the financial plan first. And that is kind of the go-to, right? Where they're building the financial plan based on your goals. They understand your situation and they can integrate all elements of it, from the early career life stage all the way to retirement and estate planning. That would be my advice, right? Speak to a CFP professional or a QAFP professional. Get it. Like I'm a CFP professional. I also teach at the university level. People would say that I know more than your average bear, but I also have a financial planner because I know that I have my own biases, and I know that I like to spend, money on certain things, and a financial planner will help keep you on track and accountable to your goals in a way that balances out the best parts of your lifestyle and prioritizes your needs. So it's really about finding somebody you know, like, and trust to help you on this path. Because once your finances are in order, right, you could just set that aside. That professional is going to take care of it, and you can focus on the things that matter to you, like your family and your health.
Lovely. That's a great way to end. Daniel, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
This podcast is not to be construed as offering specific investment advice. Please consult a qualified advisor before acting. My books, Stand Up to the Financial Services Industry and Bullshift, are available online. If you'd like to meet to discuss how the topics in this podcast affect you directly, please visit my website.